Now, besides the conformation things that I've talked about, there are some issues that we face within the breed or have faced within the breed, and those need to be addressed. And that gets addressed by being active in your registries and your breed clubs. Excuse me. For a long time, we've had a struggle over the height of the bucks. The standard right now is 23 and a half inches for a buck, but it's still preferred that a buck be 21 inches tall. Well, there is something called sexual dimorphism, which means that the different sexes have different shapes. If you look at a guppy, the male guppy is really pretty. He's really brightly colored, but he's about half the size of the female. The female is plain, but she's really huge compared to her size, compared to the male. Well, the male's trying to get her attention, and she's trying to fade into the kelp. So that's why they have that sexual dimorphism. In cattle and in dairy goats, the bull or the buck is usually bigger than the cow or the doe. In every other breed, except the Pygmy and the Nigerian, there is a 2-inch difference accepted between the maximum of a doe height and the maximum buck height. And the idea that these are small goats, so therefore we should have smaller sizes, doesn't really hold up when you think about sexual dimorphism. Yes, you can have a smaller goat, but you still need to make allowances for secondary sex characteristics. Bucks are going to be taller, they're going to be wider, they're going to be stinkier. That's just part of being a buck. So we want to have a tight withers, but we don't want to have a sail in that withers. We don't want to have it out of proportion. We see a trend now towards the standard says uphill. Well, uphill doesn't mean Mount Everest, okay? Uphill means the withers are a little higher than the rump, not a lot higher than the rump. And we also see photographs of people who's got their buck or their doe looks really high because they've scrunched down in the back end and they've made that doe or that buck react to that scrunchie by bending its back legs. Well, you don't need to have that kind of exaggerated uphill. Having that is not a natural stance for an animal. So we need to make allowances for bucks to be taller than does in the same ratio that they would be naturally. That doesn't mean put a big sail of a wither set on a buck. And it doesn't mean put a teeny tiny rump on a buck, because that teeny tiny rump on a buck is going to translate to short, narrow pelvis on his daughters, and then you're going to have problems. We also have another problem of the height of all the goats. Okay? When the breed started out, the standard was 19 inches. But those were animals that were coming from Africa, that were being fed as, until that point, had been bred as only for meat for the African predators. When they started actually being fed a regular meal that was eventually balanced for a healthy goat, they grew taller. We also started to see an average lifespan of a goat going from 6 years old being an old goat to 14 years old being an old goat. And goats don't stop growing when they're a year old. I've had bucks keep growing until they're 6 years old. So I think we need to start thinking about the size of our bucks. If they're at height at 21 months old, at 24 months old, they're going to go over height. In my way of thinking, if they're going to go over height by an inch or more, then that's a buck that shouldn't be in the gene pool. If he's going to go over 24 and a half inches tall, he's too tall. But at the same time, if we have a doe who's at height standard, she's at 22 and a half inches tall at a year old, she's going to go over too. Does don't stop growing at a year old. And for a long time, we saw most of the goats staying at around 22 and a half inches. Earlier on in the breed, when we were still had an open herd book or 1 or 2 generations away from an open herd book, where there were still plenty of Toggenburg, Alpine, Saanen bloodlines active in those gene pools, we were still seeing the unpredictable heights. We're not supposed to be seeing unpredictable heights in a species that is as well established, in a breed that is as well established as the Nigerian dwarf goat. However, within the last 10 years, we started seeing the resurgence of overheight does again. And those does began to win in the show ring because they had whopping udders. And there has been strong suspicion since that time that those animals were not the product of an open herd, of a closed herd book. That there was misrepresentation in their bloodline. But because they started winning in the show ring, because 1/3 of the value of a goat in the show ring is its udder and udder construction, those began to be concentrated. And we started seeing a lot of goats winning with whopping udders and huge milk production, but low butter, fat, and protein. And I've talked about that a little bit in other classes. But the quality of the milk in the Nigerian dwarf is high butterfat, high protein. The milk solids are high. The fluid milk is fairly low compared to full-size goats. And if you think about it, this little goat is going to have up to 6 kids at a time. She's got to have a concentrated milk to feed all those babies. She's not going to be able to carry a tremendous amount. So she has to have liquid gold and milk. Okay? So it's going to shake out in time. But meanwhile, we're starting to see a lot of herds getting awards in the in breed clubs and things for high fluid milk production, but they don't have the liquid gold. I haven't tasted that milk, so I can't tell you whether it tastes the same as Nigerian milk. But I can tell you that when Nigerians have been crossed with other breeds, you wind up getting a higher quality milk than what the mother was, but a lower production than the buck's mother had. So it's a compromise. It's more milk, but it's not as high quality of milk. So that's what's being brought into the bloodline, if indeed our suspicions are correct about the bringing in of other bloodlines after the herd book was closed. So we have to look at production quality. And then the other thing we have to look at is the glut on the market. Yes, you can make money by selling baby goats. But then you've got to be responsible. I feel like every baby goat that's born in this world is my responsibility, that it came from my farm because it was my choice to make that happen. I try really hard to make sure that as much as I possibly can, those goats go to forever homes. They go to homes that the people want the goat milk, and they understand that they're looking at years of commitment. They understand that they're going to need to find somebody to help them milk their goats, but they're going to have to dry off their goats sometimes so they can have a family vacation. I try really hard to not sell female goats as pets unless there's an agreement that they should not be bred. Part of the reason for that is because that's worth a lot of money. But that goat is also the walking advertisement for my farm. I want that advertisement to go where she's going to be used so people can see her, not just in somebody's pet backyard where she's never going to be bred. That's not her purpose. That's the purpose of a wether. It's not the purpose of a buck or a doe. So I want to make sure that as much as possible, and people can lie, so I can't guarantee it, but I want to make sure that the people who buy from me are looking out for the long-term best for their goats and the progeny of those goats. So it is getting harder to sell animals now because there are so many backyard breeders who are looking at the wrong things. And I tell people that if you care about what color it is, buy a wether, because all you want's the color. And you can't ever guarantee what the color of the offsprings are going to be. You can't even guarantee that blue-eyed does are going to have blue-eyed kids. Because unless you make sure that she's homozygous and she's bred to a homozygous buck, meaning that she's not carrying any other eye color than blue, there's a chance her babies are going to have brown eyes. Does that make them any less valuable? Not in my mind. Not any more than it makes her more valuable for having blue eyes. She is no more valuable to me, whether she's blue-eyed or polled. She's really no more valuable to me if she's normally has quince, because I don't know whether she's going to be able to handle all 5. She's valuable to me because she can give me milk and she can give me babies and she can make me smile. That's what her value is. So when you're thinking about breeding Nigerian dwarf goats, bear that in mind. You have to make up your own mind what you do. The rest of this class will be about what it takes to actually prove yourself so that you can actually sell those goats. If you're caring only about eye color and coat color, you don't need the rest of this class, because none of that is really going to matter to you. All right? So I hope you stay with me, and I'll see you next class. Bye.